You know that feeling when you're watching someone your age panic about getting older while you're secretly thinking, this might be the bestest thing that ever happens to you? If you're an INFJ, that moment of quiet anticipation isn't weird, it's strategic. While others fear wrinkles and slowing down, you've been unconsciously preparing for something extraordinary. Your entire psychological evolution into what I call your final form. Here's what most people don't understand about INFJs. Aging isn't just getting older. It's unlocking decades of carefully collected psychological intelligence. By the end of this video, you'll see why every painful experience, every overwhelming emotion, every moment you felt too much, was actually advanced training for the strategic master you're becoming. Before we start, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our weekly deep dives into the world of personality types. And if you're looking for a deeper understanding of yourself and your INFJ personality, browse our favorite INFJ products in the description, and click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. The Strategic Foundation: Why Young INFJs Are in Training Mode. Let's talk about something that will completely reframe how you see your younger years. Young INFJs aren't just living life. They're unconsciously running the most sophisticated data collection operation on human behavior you've ever seen. Every conversation, every relationship, every social interaction is feeding information into a psychological database that will later become their greatest weapon. Think about it this way. While your peers were focused on immediate gratification, you were absorbing patterns. When someone said one thing, but their body language screamed something else, you noticed. When people made promises they had no intention of keeping, you cataloged that behavior. When manipulation tactics were deployed against you, your brain was quietly taking notes. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition on steroids. Your INFJ brain has been running background software this entire time, learning to decode human nature at levels most people never reach. Those exhausting social situations where you felt like you were drowning in other people's emotions, that wasn't weakness. That was intensive psychological training. Here's where it gets fascinating. Young INFJs often think they're broken because they can't just enjoy surface-level interactions like everyone else seems to. They feel guilty about needing so much alone time. They apologize for being too sensitive, too deep, too much. But what they don't realize is they're not broken. They're in boot camp for psychological mastery. Every time you people-pleased your way through a situation you hated, you were learning about manipulation and compliance. Every time someone took advantage of your kindness, you were studying predatory behavior patterns. Every time you felt overwhelmed by someone else's emotions, you were developing empathic intelligence that most people will never possess. The betrayals hurt the most, didn't they? But here's what's brilliant about the INFJ psychological development process. Even the betrayals serve a purpose. Each one teaches you something crucial about human nature. You learn to recognize the early warning signs of deception. You develop an internal lie detector system. You start understanding the difference between genuine connection and emotional manipulation. Around age 35 to 40-something shifts. The data collection phase starts transitioning into strategic implementation. All those years of absorbing information about human behavior suddenly click into place. You stop being reactive and start being strategic. You stop taking everything personally and start recognizing patterns. This is when the INFJ begins to understand that their sensitivity was never a flaw. It was advanced psychological equipment. While others were operating with basic emotional intelligence, you were developing what I call truth vision, the ability to see through facades and understand people's real motivations, often within minutes of meeting them. The people-pleasing phase wasn't wasted time either. It taught you exactly how manipulation works because you experienced it from the inside. You learned how exhausting it is to constantly shapeshift for other people's comfort. You discovered that authentic connection is impossible when you're performing instead of being genuine. Young INFJs often feel like they're failing at life because they can't maintain the energy levels that social interaction demands. But what they don't realize is they're not supposed to maintain those levels. They're supposed to be selective. Their psychological training is preparing them to identify which people and situations deserve their energy, and which ones are emotional vampires in disguise. By the time an INFJ reaches their 40s, they've essentially completed a decades-long advanced course in human psychology. They understand behavioral patterns that therapists study for years. They can spot emotional manipulation from across the room. They know the difference between someone who's genuinely struggling and someone who's weaponizing their problems to control others. This training phase explains why young INFJs feel so overwhelmed by the world. They're not just experiencing life. They're unconsciously analyzing, studying, and cataloging every psychological interaction they encounter. It's exhausting, but it's also building something extraordinary. A strategic mind that can navigate human complexity with surgical precision. The great unmasking, when authenticity becomes their weapon. Here's where the real transformation begins. Somewhere in their late 30s or early 40s, INFJs reach what I call the unmasking moment. It's not dramatic. It's actually quite quiet, but it changes everything. They wake up one day and think, you know what? I'm done performing for people who never understood the show anyway. For decades, they've been shape-shifting, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, pretending to enjoy small talk when their soul was screaming for depth, hiding their intensity because someone once told them they were too much, wearing masks so perfectly crafted that sometimes they forgot what their real face looked like. But here's what happens when an INFJ drops the mask. They don't become mean or cruel. They become magnetic in a completely different way. Authentic INFJs have this gravitational pull that draws in exactly the right people, while simultaneously repelling energy vampires and emotional manipulators. Think about it this way. When you're performing, you attract people who like the performance, not the real you. When you stop performing, you might lose some audience members, but the ones who stay are there for the authentic person underneath. This natural filtering system is one of the most powerful tools an older INFJ develops. The unmasking process usually starts small. They stop responding to texts immediately just because someone expects instant availability. They decline invitations without offering medical-grade excuses. They express opinions that might not be popular. These tiny acts of authenticity build momentum, like psychological compound interest. What's beautiful about this phase is how it affects their relationships. The people who were only interested in the masked version start falling away naturally. They don't get the same emotional supply they used to extract. The INFJ isn't available for manipulation anymore. They're not absorbing everyone else's problems like an emotional sponge. Meanwhile, something fascinating happens with genuine people. They're drawn to this new, authentic energy, like moths to flame. Real recognizes real, and people who value depth and honesty can sense that the INFJ has stopped pretending. Conversations become richer, connections become more meaningful. The quality of their relationships improves dramatically, even as the quantity decreases. This authenticity becomes a weapon, but not in an aggressive way. It's defensive weaponry. When you're genuinely yourself, you become immune to certain types of psychological manipulation. People can't guilt trip you into being someone you're not, because you're no longer afraid of disappointing them. They can't use your people-pleasing tendencies against you, because you've retired from that profession. The older INFJ develops what I call selective engagement. They choose their battles carefully. They invest their emotional energy strategically. They understand that not every conversation deserves their depth, and not every person deserves their vulnerability. This isn't coldness, it's wisdom. Here's where it gets really powerful. Authentic INFJs become truth-tellers in a world full of people performing fake happiness. They're willing to have the conversations others avoid. They're comfortable with emotional complexity in ways that make them invaluable friends and advisors. People start seeking them out, specifically because they know they'll get honesty instead of platitudes. The mask wasn't protecting them. It was limiting them. When they finally remove it, they discover that their intensity isn't something to apologize for. It's something to wield strategically. Their depth isn't a social handicap. It's a competitive advantage. Their sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's precision. Emotional intelligence. This unmasking creates a ripple effect. Other people, especially younger INFJs, start getting permission to be authentic too. They see an older INFJ living genuinely and think, maybe I don't have to perform either. Maybe my real self is actually more interesting than my fake self. The strategic power of authenticity is that it eliminates so much unnecessary drama from their lives. When you're genuine, you don't have to remember which version of yourself you presented to which person. You don't have to maintain exhausting performances. You can just be and trust that the right people will appreciate what they find. Truth vision, developing unshakable intuitive intelligence. Now let's talk about something that separates older INFJs from everyone else: their ability to see truth with surgical precision. Remember how young INFJs had strong intuition, but constantly second-guessed themselves? Am I imagining things? Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. Those days of self-doubt are over. What happens is decades of pattern recognition finally crystallize into what I call truth vision. It's like their brain has been running facial recognition software on human behavior for 40 years, and now it operates at lightning speed. They can walk into a room and instantly download information about people that others miss completely. That person putting on the cheerful mask, they see the exhaustion underneath. The colleague who's overly friendly, they sense the manipulation brewing. The family member who says they're fine, they know exactly what emotional storm is coming. This isn't mind reading, it's pattern matching based on thousands of previous encounters. Here's what makes this so powerful. Young INFJs collected all this data, but didn't trust their conclusions. They'd sense something was off, but talked themselves out of it, because they didn't want to seem judgmental or paranoid. Older INFJs have learned to trust their psychological radar completely, because it's been proven right too many times to ignore. This truth vision becomes both blessing and burden. On one hand, it's incredibly useful. They can spot red flags in relationships within the first few conversations. They can identify workplace politics before they get caught in the crossfire. They can sense when someone is lying, even when the lie is technically well constructed. But here's the burden part. Once you develop this level of psychological insight, you can't unsee what you're seeing. You know when people are performing instead of being genuine. You recognize emotional manipulation tactics immediately. You can tell when someone is using their problems as weapons to control others. This creates an interesting dynamic in their relationships. People often feel seen in ways that are both comforting and slightly unnerving when they're around an older INFJ. It's like being X-rayed, but in an empathetic way. The INFJ isn't judging, they're just seeing, and people can sense that level of perception. What's fascinating is how this affects their decision-making. They stop agonizing over choices because their intuitive intelligence provides clear guidance. Should I trust this person? Their truth vision gives them an immediate answer. Is this opportunity genuine or a trap? Their pattern recognition kicks in instantly. This psychological accuracy becomes a competitive advantage in every area of their lives. In business, they can assess potential partners and clients with remarkable precision. In relationships, they can identify compatibility or red flags early. In friendships, they can distinguish between genuine connection and emotional vampirism. But here's where the real strategic power emerges. Older INFJs learn not just to see truth, but to know what to do with it. They develop what I call tactical wisdom. They understand when to speak truth and when to keep it to themselves. They know when someone is ready to hear feedback and when they're just looking for validation. This isn't about becoming cynical or suspicious. It's about developing such refined emotional intelligence that they can navigate human complexity with surgical precision. They can see people's potential and their limitations simultaneously. They can identify who's worth investing in and who's an emotional energy drain. The most powerful aspect of this truth vision is how it protects them from manipulation. When you can see through facades immediately, you become immune to most psychological games. Gaslighting doesn't work on someone who trusts their perceptions completely. Emotional manipulation fails when the target can identify the tactics being used. This creates what I call psychological immunity. They've seen every manipulation strategy. They've experienced every type of emotional manipulation. They've cataloged every variety of human deception. Now they can spot these patterns instantly and respond strategically rather than reactively. Truth vision transforms the INFJ from someone who gets overwhelmed by human complexity into someone who navigates it masterfully. They become human lie detectors, not because they're suspicious, but because they're psychologically sophisticated. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition, perfected through decades of careful observation. The fortress mind, building psychological immunity. Let's talk about something remarkable that happens to INFJs as they age. They develop what I call fortress mind, an unshakable inner peace that nothing can penetrate. Remember those anxious, overthinking years when their minds were chaotic battlegrounds? When they'd lose sleep over conversations from 3 years ago? When worst-case scenarios waged constant war against hopeful possibilities? Those days are over. Here's what changes. Life has a way of testing INFJs repeatedly, especially in their younger years. It's like the universe enrolled them in advanced emotional resilience training without asking permission. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every moment of feeling too much was actually building something extraordinary: psychological immunity. Young INFJs are emotional sponges. They absorb everything around them, like human lightning rods, for other people's feelings. They catastrophize, ruminate, and replay conversations endlessly. Their nervous systems are constantly activated because they're processing not just their own emotions, but everyone else's too. It's exhausting and overwhelming. But here's what's brilliant about this process. All that emotional chaos was actually training. Think of it like psychological weightlifting. Each difficult experience added resistance to their emotional strength training. Every time they survived something that felt impossible, they proved to themselves that they're more resilient than they realized. Older INFJ, I still feel deeply. That never goes away. But they've developed this unshakable core of calm underneath all the feeling. They've walked through enough fires to know they're fireproof. They've weathered enough storms to trust their ability to survive whatever comes next. This isn't denial or spiritual bypassing. They're not pretending pain doesn't hurt. What they've learned is that emotions are visitors, not permanent residents. They understand viscerally, not just intellectually, that this too shall pass. Not because it's a motivational poster quote, but because they've lived it hundreds of times. They felt like the world was ending, and then watched the sunrise the next morning. This inner fortress makes them magnetic to people who are struggling. There's something about their energy that feels safe, stable, grounded. In a world of chaos, the older INFJ becomes a lighthouse, steady, unwavering, reliably there. People are drawn to this energy because it feels like psychological safety in human form. Here's where the strategic advantage becomes clear. This emotional regulation mastery means they can stay calm in situations that would destabilize others. Workplace drama doesn't trigger them anymore because they've seen it all before. Family conflicts don't send them into anxiety spirals because they understand the patterns. Relationship challenges don't overwhelm them because they've developed tools for emotional navigation. The fortress mind also creates what I call selective empathy. Instead of absorbing everyone's emotions indiscriminately, they choose when and how to engage empathically. They can feel someone's pain without taking it on as their own. They can offer support without drowning in other people's problems. This isn't coldness. It's emotional intelligence perfect. What's powerful about this psychological immunity is that it's earned, not given. They didn't read about resilience in books. They forged it in the fires of real experience. They didn't learn emotional regulation from courses. They developed it by surviving emotional storms that would have broken other people. This creates an interesting dynamic. While others are having midlife crises, older INFJs are having midlife awakenings. They're not trying to recapture their youth or avoid aging. They're stepping into their power, maybe for the first time ever. They've built something inside themselves that no external circumstance can shake. The fortress mind becomes their greatest asset. It allows them to take risks they wouldn't have dared attempt when they were younger. It gives them confidence to speak truth, even when it's uncomfortable. It provides the stability needed to pursue their authentic path, regardless of other people's opinions. This psychological immunity transforms them from anxious overthinkers into unshakable strategic minds who can navigate any emotional complexity with grace and wisdom. Final form activation, the complete strategic INFJ. This is where everything comes together. All the psychological training, all the pattern recognition, all the emotional intelligence development culminates in what I call final form activation. The older INFJ isn't just managing their complexity anymore. They're weaponizing it strategically. Here's what integration looks like. Their introverted intuition, which spent decades collecting data about human behavior, now operates like advanced psychological radar. Their extroverted feeling, which used to make them people-please compulsively, now becomes selective, strategic empathy. Their introverted thinking, which used to second-guess every decision, now provides crystal-clear analytical frameworks. Their extroverted sensing, which used to overwhelm them with environmental stimuli, now feeds them precise, real-time information. When all these functions work together harmoniously, the INFJ becomes something extraordinary. They're no longer the overwhelmed empath, absorbing everyone's problems. They're not the anxious overthinker, paralyzed by too many possibilities. They've evolved into strategic psychological masters who can read situations, navigate complexity, and influence outcomes with surgical precision. Purpose clarity eliminates the decision paralysis that plagued their younger years. Remember when they felt called to save humanity but couldn't figure out how? When they wanted to make a difference but felt scattered across a dozen different goals? That confusion disappears when they discover their specific mission. Maybe they're meant to mentor struggling young people through difficult transitions. Perhaps they're called to create art that helps others feel less alone. Maybe they're designed to build businesses that prioritize human well-being over profit. Whatever their purpose, it becomes laser-focused. This clarity transforms them from helpers into wisdom keepers. They stop trying to fix everyone and start strategically guiding those who are ready to receive guidance. They understand that unsolicited advice rarely lands well, so they wait to be asked. When someone does ask, they offer truth wrapped in compassion, insight delivered with surgical precision. The people-pleasing phase is officially dead and buried. They've learned that authentic kindness comes from a full cup, not an empty one. They understand that saying yes to everything means saying no to what matters most. They've discovered that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates that let in what belongs and keep out what doesn't. This creates what I call strategic selectivity. They choose their battles carefully. They invest their energy intentionally. They engage with purpose rather than obligation. This isn't selfishness, it's resource management mastery. They've learned that their time, attention, and emotional energy are finite resources that must be allocated strategically. Their complexity, which used to feel like a burden, becomes their greatest competitive advantage. While others operate with basic emotional intelligence, the INFJ functions with psychological sophistication that's almost unfair. They can see patterns others miss. They can predict behavioral outcomes with remarkable accuracy. They can navigate interpersonal dynamics that would confuse or overwhelm most people. Here's where the ripple effect becomes powerful. When INFJs operate at full psychological capacity, they transform everyone around them. Their strategic wisdom influences decision-making in their families. Their emotional intelligence elevates workplace dynamics. Their authentic presence gives others permission to drop their own masks and be genuine. They become what I call psychological force multipliers, Their influence extends far beyond their immediate circle, because they're operating from a place of integrated wisdom rather than reactive emotion. They're not trying to control outcomes. They're creating conditions for positive change to emerge naturally. The final form, INFJ, understands something crucial. Their struggles weren't obstacles to overcome. They were preparation for strategic mastery. Every painful experience was advanced training. Every overwhelming emotion was data collection. Every moment they felt too much was evidence they were exactly enough. So here's the truth about the aging INFJ. They don't just get older. They evolve into their psychological final form. All those years of feeling too sensitive, too deep, too different weren't wasted time. They were advanced preparation for strategic mastery. While others fear aging, INFJs should embrace it, because this is when they finally become who they were always meant to be. Click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test and if you want to continue the journey to understanding yourself or an INFJ in your life, click either of the following videos, where we continue to unlock the secrets of the INFJ personality type.